Hi, my name is Zoe and this is my Bookish channel. I will give you a little overview of who I am, maybe a couple book reviews, and then that'll be that for my first video. I'm a recent graduate from George Mason University. I got my Bachelor's of Arts in Government and International Politics. I am going to be starting as a library science student at Simmons University through their master's program in library science with a concentration in archives management. I am an avid reader. As you can see, here's my bookshelf with all the little knickknacks. I read a lot when I was a kid, but as I got older, it kind of, the pace went down a little bit. You know, I read a lot in elementary school and middle school. Like starting in 4th grade, I really read so much. I would just devour any book ever. My mom was always renting books on Kindle for me. But about the time when I got to high school, I really stopped reading as much. I know I read a couple books. I read books for school, obviously. And there were definitely books that I really liked in high school. I read Rebecca, which I love, highly recommend. And then it wasn't until 2021, which would have been my second year of college, that I really got back into reading. And I started with the Crave series. I read Crave, and that's really what got me back into reading. It really was very similar to the first time I got into reading. One of the first books I read was the Iron Face series by Julie Kagawa. Those books really just got me into reading. I really loved the fairies and just the fantastical elements, the love story. I just found it so interesting, and it's what really got me to start reading. And then from there, I went Hunger Games, Divergent, The Uglies, oh my goodness, so many other things, Twilight, of course, and so on and so forth, till I got to this point where I've read hundreds of books. I own probably well over 600 physical books. It's definitely a problem. Like, this is just a small section of my bookshelf that you can see behind me, and then, my pops. But anyways, in 2021, I saw a TikTok video talking about Crave, and to me it just sounded really fun, and I thought, why not give it a try and see if I like it. And so I read Crave and I really enjoyed it. I found it really fun. The first book is definitely a little bit cheesy. There's lots of like pop culture references and like AF and hashtags in it that are kind of silly. But Tracy Wolff definitely kind of changed that when it came to the second book, Crush, and then throughout the rest of the books. But I tore through Crave, I read Crush, and then I just started getting these books as gifts. And so in 2021, I also started my Goodreads account, and I read 5 books that year. And so then starting in 2022, I started asking for books for Christmas. So I got those books from Christmas, started reading them. I read the library book, which is a little bit higher on my shelf, you can't see it, which is about libraries in California, specifically about a library that got burned down and kind of the mystery behind it, like who did it, what happened, but also a lot about the history of libraries in the area. It's super interesting. I highly recommend it if you do like libraries. I really liked it, especially since at that point I had already known I wanted to be a librarian, and so I got that book because I was excited about that. I also read If We Were Villains as one of the first books of 2022. I loved that book. I'm not a big Shakespeare person, my last semester of undergrad, I did take a Shakespeare class called Shakespeare and Race. So I did read a couple of Shakespeare's books, specifically ones that are tied into race. So I did get a little bit more information on that. So I might go back and read If We Were Villains again. But I really enjoyed that book, and just kind of like all the elements of it, the mystery, the characters, how horrible they are. I don't know what it is about me, but I love to hate characters. But that book's just really interesting. You're not ready for the plot twist. You're not ready for all the relationships that are going to happen in the book. And so I just really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. I also read the rest of the Crave series, Covet and Court. I do have Charm, but I have not finished it yet. I've read a little bit of it, but I haven't gotten through it all the way. I won't go into details on that because, you know, you never want to spoil the book. But I will say that I really love the, like, friendship, and like strength through friendship aspect of those books. I think it's a really good message, and I really wish that those books would have been around when I was a teenager, because I think they would have been really helpful for me to read, because I think the message is a lot less like boy focused. While there is like the romance aspect, I think there's a lot to do with like friendship and personal strength, and I think that's really important for young people to read, as opposed to like more of the love, romance, everything. What else? You know, I've read a couple books. I read Hell Followed Us, which is a phenomenal book. The cover is beautiful, but it's just really interesting. The idea of queer kids versus very like alt-right conservative Christian groups. It's just really interesting, and also like the idea of like the apocalypse and the end of the world, and kind of like figuring out how to survive, especially as like a young queer person, and kind of the banding together of young people, of queer people, of friends, to take down something bigger. I love books with that kind of message in them. But yeah, a big reader. Even though I was a government major, I took a couple English classes. I took a class called Voices of Black Women, where we read 3 books by Black women. Like I said, I took that Shakespeare and Race class. We read 5 of Shakespeare's books. I took a folklore class, which is very interesting. I also took a class called Reading Through History, which also had some very interesting books in it. And I'd love to talk about kind of like the different books that I read in classes, what I thought about them. But yeah, that's kind of me. I am Texas-based. I am an avid reader. Again, I started on TikTok, and kind of decided to, I've been thinking about doing this kind of like YouTube channel for a while, but I wasn't really sure about it, until now. So here we are, giving it a shot, because why not? I have a blog as well where I write book reviews, more in depth. I like to write, so that's kind of like a way for me to express myself creatively. But yeah, thank you for watching, for listening, and I hope to post some more interesting content.